Open Sesame. On this episode of Eat, Sleep, Drive, we are talking about the Tesla Model 3, and not just what it's like to drive, but what it's like to live with on a day-to-day basis. Welcome everyone to another episode of Eat, Sleep, Drive, and today we have the Tesla Model 3 next to me. I've been driving this car or another Model 3 for the past 7 days exclusively. I've been very careful not to drive any of my other cars because I was curious what it's like to live solely with an electric vehicle. So that's what we're going to talk about today. I'm going to talk a little bit about what this car does and how it drives different than a regular car, but I'm going to talk more about what it's like just living with an electric vehicle and all the nuances that come with that, along with charging it and range and stuff like that. Now, before we get started, I have two other videos on these Teslas, a regular rear-wheel drive model, extended range, and then this Model 3 Performance. I have those two videos in my prior video section, so check those out if you're curious. And also, I should shoot out a quick thank you to Aaron for letting me borrow these vehicles. I'm going to put a link below in the description. He rents his cars out on Turo, so you can check these out for yourself. Check out the link below if you want to do that. Open Sesame. Okay, we'll do it with the app. There we go. Okay, now on to the charging. Charging was really the biggest question that I had about owning a all-electric vehicle, more specifically a Tesla. I do not have any sort of upgraded level 2 or 3 charging in my house because I don't own an electric vehicle at this point. I just have a regular standard US outlet. So I was curious, would I be able to sustain my regular commuting mileage, which is about 30 miles round trip to and from work, with just a standard outlet, like just a standard plug from an outlet at your regular house. And these cars come with a cable that you can plug into. The answer is yes. I was able to get about right around 35 miles overnight of juice to be able to drive the next day. So, if you basically just go to and from work throughout the week, you work your 9 to 5, come home, plug it in, and your commute is under 35 miles, you'll be able to keep up with a level 1 charger. Now, I've been doing a lot of extra driving on this car because I've been writing and doing video reviews for the car. So I've been doing a lot more charging, and I've had to go to the Supercharger station to kind of keep up with that. Now, I'm not ignorant in the fact that if you own one of these cars, of course, you're going to be doing some extra driving at some point. So you will have to stop by a Supercharger station. Fortunately, just in my city, Cincinnati, there's 3 or 4 strictly Tesla stations, and then there's a whole bunch more, third parties that you can swing by. So really, charging hasn't been as much of an issue as I thought, especially considering this model has 310 miles of range. Now, while we're on the topic of range, this car and the other one that I borrowed, the extended range model, had about 310 miles of range, and I found that to be mostly accurate. There are a lot of factors that factor into that as far as what kind of driving you're doing. Oh my God. I've obviously been driving it pretty hard because I've been doing a review, so I've been using a little more energy than probably is normal. And additionally, things like AC, heat are big factors in these cars because that's something that's going to reduce your range. So it sort of depends on your climate. Your mileage may vary, as they say, but overall I found it to be within like 10% roughly of the advertised range, which is, I think, pretty good all things considered. One thing to keep in mind with that, though, is that Tesla recommends you not charge this car to 100% all the time. And that seems kind of weird because you're like, I obviously want all the capacity I can, all the range that I can get, but it's actually bad for the long-term performance of your battery. Your battery will degrade faster if you are constantly at 100%. So they recommend somewhere around 80, 90%. That's one thing to keep in mind with these cars. If you want to keep it long-term, as my charging port automatically closes, if you want to keep it long-term, you're not going to have the most range all the time. Now, they say if you charge it 100% and immediately use it, it's not a big deal, not as big of a deal as charging it to 100% and just kind of always keeping it there. That's pretty bad. Now, these cars do come with an 8-year, 100,000 mile warranty. So as long as you don't plan to sell it before then, you're pretty much covered from Tesla's warranty. So is Tesla going to be around within the next 10 years, or in the next 10 years, I should say? I hope so, but they're sort of uncertain at this point, just given their financial struggles here and there. I hope they're around, but you never know. Now, we've already talked a little bit about charging, and I've been able to just charge the car at home and had no problems just keeping up with a 110 outlet. I've already talked about that, but I was just curious like what the supercharging stations were like and how it worked and all that stuff, just because I had never been to one. So I rolled up here at the Supercharger station. One of the questions that I had was, how busy are these places? Because now that they're selling a lot more Model 3s, I know like when they were Model S's, there weren't a whole ton of them, but now that they're selling a lot more Model 3s, I was thinking these might even be like too crowded and it takes a long time to charge. Maybe there's a wait time. I've heard of that online. In Ohio, that is not the case. As you can see, no one is here. I am the only car charging here. So there's like what, at least 10, maybe 11 ports here, and I'm the only one. So in California, it sounds like it's a problem for charging, but I can tell you right now in Ohio, it is not a problem at all. Now, this comes to how long it takes. Well, when your battery is closer to actually needing charge, because once again, I didn't really need to charge it, I just kind of want to check it out. I still have 200 miles of range, and to get the extra 100 miles that would top this thing off, it will take 40 minutes to charge. And that's because as you get closer to full, it takes longer and longer to charge. So that's one thing to keep in mind. These aren't really made for being topped off. And once again, I knew that going into it, I just wanted to experience the station, but you can expect kind of better times if your battery was more depleted. You could get a lot more mileage a lot quicker. Now, as I sort of reflect on driving this car exclusively for a week, I think the first thing that comes to mind is just from a commuting perspective, you pretty much can't beat the luxury of an electric vehicle in the NVH department. NVH stands for noise, vibration, harshness. And with electric vehicles, they are second to none in that category. I don't care how good your engine, your petrol engine is, it's just not going to be as quiet, offer less vibration or any sort of harshness than an electric vehicle. And there's obviously the main reason for that being there's no engine, you're not burning anything, the electric motor is completely silent, there's no shifting of gears, there's no gears in an electric car. There's, you know, it just goes. The motor spins and you go. So from a unwind perspective, as I noticed myself like coming home from work, driving this car, it's a really nice, just sort of decompress coming home and just being in a nice state of mind. The autopilot is nice, even if there's traffic, it doesn't really stress you out too much because it's really doing all the driving for you and putting up with all the idiots on the road. So, you know, from that perspective, it's absolutely great. So let's then talk about what it's like to get used to an electric vehicle, because they do fundamentally drive a little bit differently, and you can adjust these settings quite a bit, at least with a Tesla. But the first thing that you really have to get used to is the braking regeneration with a electric car. So when you get going, obviously it uses electric energy to get going, and when you're coming to a stop, the car wants to try and recuperate some of that energy. So if I let off the throttle and I'm not on the brake, the car brakes more than a traditional automatic petrol engine car would. And that does take some getting used to. And also, in that regard, it doesn't creep by default. And what do I mean by creep? In a traditional gas automatic car, if you are just at a standstill, at a stop, flat ground, take your foot off the brake, the car will just move forward a little bit, right? It just like ever so slowly inches forward. By default, these cars don't do that. You can change the setting, but I found I kind of liked it to not creep. The car just goes when you actually put your foot to the throttle. So once again, just something that you can easily get used to and really isn't a big deal at all. Outside of that, this is still fundamentally just a regular car, and you know, isn't any harder to drive than any other car. But there are two major complaints that I've really kind of eventually formulated about it after having this car for an extended period of time. The first thing is what's going on right now, and that is the lack of the automatic wiper being any good at all. The windshield right now is, I can hardly see out of it, and yet the automatic wiper still does not want to clear the windshield. This is a simple fix. Like, they just need to turn up the sensitivity on the automatic wiper. I'm certain that it's using the camera, the front-facing camera that it uses for all of its safety and autopiloting and stuff like that to see if the window is dirty or not, but just turn up the sensitivity. Like, it's not that hard. I think it's a safety concern. I think they should turn it up. I often have to manually adjust the wipers, and I don't like having to do that on a screen, because anytime you have to use dexterity to touch a screen when there's bumps and stuff going on, you inevitably hit the wrong button. So that's a very minor complaint, albeit. The other complaint I have is with the app. It seems to connect and disconnect at random times. You know, if you're anywhere remotely close to the car, it's nice. Like, the app is awesome just to be able to walk up to your car, get in because it's tied to Bluetooth, and then go. But it seems to hog battery as well. It's a little bit clunky. I was trying to use the summon button where you can move the car forward and backward. It eventually just stopped working. So maybe it's my phone, you know, so I don't want to be too critical, but I don't love the app. Now, you don't have to use the app. There's just like a little key card that you can use that I'll show you guys. You just stick it up like somewhere in the center console when you want to drive the car. So you could just kind of, I guess, probably stick it in your wallet or something like that. So you don't have to use the app, but I just found the app kind of clunky. Once again, these are more or less my biggest complaints for this car, and they are very few and far between. And I think the last thing that I'll say about this car is that it has the most usable power I've ever experienced. Not that it's the fastest car I've ever been in, although it is close, certainly from like a 0 to 30, 0 to 60 perspective. It's bonkers. But there is a certain stigma when it comes to driving a traditional petrol car in a fast way, because they're traditionally pretty loud. For example, my Mustang GT350 I absolutely love, makes wonderful noises, but not everyone else does. So when I want to get on it and enjoy it, or if I'm just commuting and I need to get in another lane quickly, it's going to make a lot of noise doing it because it's a big raucous V8. This car just flies under the radar, and you could just put your foot down at any point and be in a lane, and it doesn't cause a big scene. You know, just pulling away from a stoplight, if you want to do it quickly, you do it in this car, and no one really bats an eye because it doesn't make any noise. As opposed to other cars, once again, like my Mustang, of course, of all things, that are just super raucous, super noisy. So you can use the power more and not be judged, which is something that I never really thought about until I really started driving this car. And it kind of does go a long way. Now, I've talked about this in my last video, there's less theater to it, and I think overall it's a little less fun as a toy, but the accessibility of speed in this car is pretty unmatched from just like flying under the radar and being stealth about it. So all in all, I would say my experience with this Tesla and an all-electric vehicle for a week has been positive. It was something that I just had no idea going into how livable it would be on a day-to-day basis. And I would say for sure, you could definitely have just an electric vehicle in this day and age. At least in the Midwest, there is enough charging infrastructure without there being too many electric vehicles at this point where I've really seen anywhere where I've had to wait for an electric, to charge the car. And more importantly, I've been able to basically keep up charging it at home. If I got a level 2 charger installed, they're not terribly expensive. I would have no issues and virtually never really have to charge the car at a supercharger station unless I went on a long trip or something like that. But fortunately, there's enough Tesla stations scattered across cities that if I was going on a long trip, I think I'd be okay. So the overall electric driving experience is, I mean, from a comfort perspective, superior to a regular car. I can't argue with that at all. I think it's a little less fun, as I've talked about in my other videos. So I would love to have a Tesla as a daily driver and then a fun petrol car to burn gas on the weekends and just enjoy. That's my ideal scenario, but I definitely see how these cars are the future. And I think for most people who aren't car enthusiasts, that these cars are going to be a huge, huge game changer. Let me know what you guys think in the comments below. Once again, if you haven't watched my past 2 videos with the Model 3 and the Model 3 Performance, go check those out. Check out Aaron's link below if you want to rent a Model 3 in the Cincinnati area. And otherwise, I appreciate you guys watching. I'll see you in the next episode of Eat, Sleep, Drive. Hey guys, once again, $100 off to the first 10 people that rent a Tesla through Aaron. Check out the link below for details.